Everybody ready? All right. We'll call to order this meeting of the Yamaha County Board of Commissioners formal and informal session for July 30th of 2020. And Ken Friday, can you lead us in the flag salute from way back there? Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks again. Move on to public comment. And due to COVID-19 and social distancing requirements, we encourage anyone wishing to submit public comment or comments on agenda items to do so in written format by email at bocinfo@co.yamhill.or.us or by mail at 535 Northeast 5th Street, Mcminnville, Oregon 97128. Any comments received prior to the meeting will be shared with the Board of Commissioners and submitted to the record. And Carolina, I haven't seen any, but okay. Move on to item D, which is our work session. And D1 is a work session with the City of Mcminnville Urban Growth Boundary presentation. And it looks like we have folks both on the video conference and we have our planning director here. So who wants to lead us through this? And welcome, City of Mcminnville. Okay, so Heather Richards is going to be the presenter. All right, Heather, are you with us?
I am. Thank you. Good morning, Commissioner.
Welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning, Heather.
Good morning. So I'm the planning director for the City of Mcminnville. I also want to let you know that Jeff Cowley, the manager, is also online with us. Our legal counsel and our planning staff team. What we want to do is take you through a presentation to update you on our efforts with our urban growth boundary planning, and talk about how we hope to coordinate that with you as the county commission in terms of a decision-making process. We will be working through a PowerPoint, and DJ Heffernan, our project manager for this project, this Mcminnville, will also be participating in the presentation.
All right, thanks, Heather.
I hope that I shared my screen with you so that you can see our PowerPoint presentation.
We can see it.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. This is my first time using Microsoft Teams as a presenter, so if I bumble my way through it, I apologize. But what we want to do is we want to talk about our path forward now. Last time we talked to you 2 years ago, and there's been some changes since then. We are now pursuing a response to our urban growth boundary remand that happened back in 2012. It came to the city as a remand. At that time, we decided to take a breather and put it on the shelf. And just recently, City Council directed us to pick up again and respond to the remand. This is a growth planning plan that's looking at our planning horizon for 2003 to 2023. We call it the Mcminnville Growth Management Urbanization Plan. And we first submitted it to the state in 2003. So in 2003, both the city and the county approved it and submitted it to the state. It came back to us. It was modified in 2005. We submitted it in 2006 again to the state. That was challenged. It went to the Court of Appeals and came back through a remand process. I always like to remind people that we talk through, the data and the wonky stuff, that we're really talking about people and how they're going to live in Mcminnville for the next 100 years in terms of our growth planning. So we need to remind ourselves that we are talking about people and their quality of life. Growth planning in Mcminnville has been fairly difficult and a struggle for the last 30 years. And we've been talking about what there's a path forward and what does that path look like. This shows the history of our UGB process. The last time we adopted a UGB was in 1981. That was for a planning horizon of 1980 to 2000. And then we've been working on the next 20-year planning horizon since 1994. And that's the effort that we're going to talk to you about today. We, at that time in 2003, after doing analysis for about 7 years, established a need for an expansion of our UGB of about 1,200 acres. We then sent it to the state, and the state agreed to allow us to bring in 217 acres of rural residential land and 42 acres for a new pool site. So what you see on here in green in label 1, 2, and 3 is the rural, 1, 2, and 4 is the rural residential lands, and 3 is the 42 acres for a future school site. The areas in pink are the other areas that we had submitted for our UGB expansion and were not approved through that process. They were the ones that were challenged through the legal Board of Appeals. So no other acreage came in, showing that we still had need. And that we're at right now at a place where we're very land supply constrained. The land within the city is nearly built out. Land that's in the rural residential areas that came in through the GB process are very first-wise. So what that means is they're like 1 and 2 acre sites, and they're not moving forward into redevelopment. So not 1 acre has come into the city for new housing development in that process. And then what you see here in blue, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but over here in blue is what we call water zone 2. This is part of our UGB growth, and this is not served with infrastructure, so it cannot develop at this time. So for a quick snapshot, Mcminnville has a very little development property left for future development, and this sort of describes what is left within the city side, inside the city limits and what's in the UGB. Most of the property left for redevelopment is really our smaller parcels, which is where we have larger home lots with a home on them, where there's the potential for that property owner to partition those lots and create new homes on that. That's a property owner decision though, in terms of whether they want to change from living on a 3-acre lot to subdividing it. And that's where most of our land supply is right now. We don't see a lot of that occurring on an annual basis. So we're really seeing the statistics are showing that we're gentrifying as a community. We have a deficit of what we anticipate is about 1,000 homes in terms of housing supply. Our lower and moderate income households are being displaced out of their homes as the housing supply gets less and less. Homelessness is increasing, and last year the average home sales price in Mcminnville was $398,200. Since we first adopted our UGB, which was meant to accommodate growth through the year 2000, we have since added another 3,200 home units to that UGB, so we increased it by 33%, which shows that we've done a fairly good job of bringing infill and development into the existing UGB. There's a lot of discussion about how much single-family dwelling units we have in Mcminnville versus multi-family. And this chart shows that we're kind of sitting the average.
Heather, we can't hear you right now.
9%. Beg your pardon?
There was a gap in the audio, but go ahead. We can hear you again.
Okay, 68% of our homes are single-family dwelling units. 9% is single-family attached, and 23% is multi-family. And if you compare it to other communities, well, let's look at Newburgh. Newburgh sits at 71% is single-family, and then 30% of other. So we sit fairly well in that housing mix structure of existing homes. This shows building permits in terms of our deficit, so definitely plummeted during the Great Recession, but we've never recovered from that. And the reason I think we haven't recovered is now we don't have land supply to build on for a recovery. We should average about 200 to 225 new home permits per year as a community, and we haven't been doing that. We did do it historically, so if you look at the number of home permits that we issued over the years, these are 4-year increments, we've definitely issued a lot more historically prior to the Great Recession than we have since then. And in terms of, because we don't have the supply, housing prices are going up. I shared with you that average sales price in Mcminnville was $398,000 last year for our home. Our household income is $55,400. For that household to afford, this is what they can afford. And we're sitting over here off the chart in terms of our average sales price in Mcminnville. So we don't have homes that can serve our median household income anymore on the market. Our affordable homes that are being built right now are selling affordable, I mean the least cost home, new construction in Mcminnville are selling between $340,000 and $390,000. So establishing needs not the issue. The issue is really how do we accommodate the future needs. We went out and we did a survey of the community and asked them, do you want to go up in terms of density within the city's UGB? Do you want to go out, maintaining the same sort of development pattern and expand out past the UGB? Or do you want to sort of go up and out, to do a little bit more density inside the city and expand out to accommodate that need? And the community came back kind of a mixed bag in terms of out and both. The majority is in the both. We did see a lot in out as well. So we came to you in 2019 and did a joint work session with the Board of County Commissioners and the City Council. At that time, we shared with you that we wanted to pick up growth when we began to saw the need of what was happening, and that we were going to pursue what we called an urban reserve area UGB process, meaning that we would look at a 50-year land supply for the next 50 years of land need for the city, and then pull a UGB out of that land supply for 20 years. This has been done in 9 other communities throughout the state and has been supported by DLCD historically. However, DLCD had a new policy change when we went to them with this idea in our process, and they said they wouldn't support it anymore. So we had to go back to the drawing board and go to the city council and say, okay, we're not getting the support from DLCD. There's all these ways that we can pursue a UGB. How do you want to move forward? And we put all those on the table from the extreme of do nothing at all, just gentrify, go to the legislation and get a fix through a bill, or pull the 2003 submittal off the shelves and respond to that. And we didn't ask staff know how the city council would respond. They directed us to evaluate pulling that 2003 plan off the shelf and responding to the remand. So that's what we're doing right now. The reason they said that is we put a lot of work into this. So there is over 25 years of work in this planning process. There's $1 million, hard dollars that the city has spent on this, and hundreds of hours of community engagement. And so what the city council wanted to do was let's build on that and finish that effort. So we then asked the question, is it legally viable even to pick up that plan and respond to the remand? And looking through the statute, visiting with the full council, we've been with the legal counsel as well, and the LPP, and everyone agrees that it is legally viable to respond to the remand from 2013. However, what we have to do is respond to it within the sandbox in which that proposal was put together. So all the rules and regulations from 2006 are what we're using for the response. But today we want to talk to you about that court decision in Humane because it involves the Board of County Commissioners, what the work program is, our progress thus far on that, and then what the next steps are. And why it's important is we need to coordinate with the county on how we move this forward, because there will need to be an approval process both with the city council and the Board of County Commissioners on this plan and project and remand to the state. The county was not named in the remand, but because this affects the county lands, you are part of the approval process. And we would like to have this concluded by December 31st of this calendar year. So we would like to rely on joint public hearings with the City Council and the Board of County Commissioners to work through this process, joint decision-making meetings, and schedule those in October, November, and December. That's the same process that was used back in 2003 and 2005 when both the city and county worked on the original plan and the modification to that plan. And then we would like to do a joint work session with both the City Council and Board of County Commissioners either in late August or early September to share the result of our work. And then we plan to do monthly updates to both you and city council so that everybody's progressing in the same manner in terms of the education and data. So the court's decision, what happened was the petitioners argued that there were 3 assignments of error in what went to LCDC from the city, and the court ruled that there was only 1 assignment of error. So we are left with 1 thing that we need to resolve. It's a big thing though. And so what the court said is that the city erred in its application of ORS 197.298. And that a correct application of that regulation could compel a different result. So ORS 197.298, that's the regulation that states what priority of land we look at first to bring to an urban growth boundary expansion. So the first priority of land to bring into urban growth boundaries is urban reserve land. So Newburgh has an urban reserve area, and as you heard me say earlier, Mcminnville doesn't. We tried to do that and take up the support to do that. The second priority of land to bring in is land adjacent to the UGB that's considered exception areas or non-resource land. So that's usually your county developed lands, rural residential land, and industrial land. The third priority is in land designated as marginal land, and we don't have any land around the city of Mcminnville designated that way. And the fourth priority is agricultural and forest lands. So around Mcminnville, we have exception lands and agricultural lands. So we have the second and fourth priority. We can bring in land of a lower priority only if you can show that the land of higher priority is found to be inadequate to accommodate the amount of land needed for the city's future growth. And that is in essence what the court remand is. So this is a map that shows the city of Mcminnville's current UGB, and then the exception lands around it, which is all the land that's not salmon colored. You can see here the exception lands have brought in the first phase of this work, all along here. And none of that has actually come into the city limits to develop since then. So it's been in the city's UGB for 16 years now. This is a land that shows soils. So anything that is red or orange on this map is considered class 1 and class 2 soils. So highest value farmland, and then yellow is class 3, and then up here in the West Hills, we have some class 4 and 6 soils. So we're surrounded by high value farmland, and we don't have a lot of lower value farmland. And that is in essence the issue that we're studying and has been a challenge over the last 25 years. So what the court said is we're no longer disputing all these other things that were challenged for 15 years as we went through this process. Those have all been taken care of, those are gone, and now we're just looking at what lands are we bringing into the city and how we justify that. The court also clarified how this regulation for priority land would work against how Rule 14 works, and it mix those two together in a certain matrix and web in terms of how we work through that process. Basically, it says we need to identify what is buildable land around the city. Then we need to consider the exception land first in terms of our land needs, and then we consider resource land as a last consideration for a 20-year planning horizon. The court also said, the petitioner said, New City did not explore enough land that's north of Fox Ridge Road, and that's mostly where the Metro 37 Abrams land is, and that we needed to do a better job of considering the cost to extend public facilities after identifying buildable land. So we considered cost to extend public facilities before identifying public buildable lands in the first round. So it also said that the court decision said we need to analyze all the study areas in a consistent manner. So when we're describing what we need for land need for the city, we need to do it consistently across all lands and apply findings to that. We see this divided into two different work tasks, one being technical with a lot of data and science, and another being procedural in terms of public engagement. At this point, it's really more informing work sessions and public hearings. In terms of our technical tasks, we're going to revise our study area maps. We're going to go back and look at buildable lands first and do a thorough job on that. And then we're going to apply that priority land structure for the court decision. And the end process is we come back with a new UGB map. This means that we're preparing all new documents based on that original document, sharing it with the public, bringing it to you, preparing findings, and then going through the public adoption process. We do plan on putting a website together and launching that next week. We want to get information out as much as we can, especially during this COVID event. We want to coordinate with you, the county, and then we need to go through formal legislative hearings. We put together a work plan to do this with our team, and we're working through that right now. The piece for the public engagement piece is right here in terms of when we start having work sessions and joint hearings with county and city council. And you see we've leveraged most of those in the months of October, November, and December. And we're working with your administrative staff to schedule those. So in terms of the court decision, the first direction is determine the land needed. So the court said, you've done a good job with the housing and employment forecast and established your need and the related land needs analysis that was adopted in 2005. But you need to do a better job of looking at how you accommodate that need out in terms of UGB expansion lands. So we're still working from that data from that time frame, and that's looking at how do we accommodate 6,000 new housing units for the city of Mcminnville. Which then in 2003 related to about 1,000 acres of need, which was refined in 2006 to about 1,100 acres of need. So we're looking at 1,000 acres of need for residential and 106 acres of need for commercial. The court then said, now you need to figure out where's your buildable land to put that need on. And so this is the first map of study areas that was done in that submission that went forward in 2005. And if you look at this comparative to the exception land map I showed you and the soils map I showed you, it's trying to pick up all the exception lands and the lower priority soils. So this is the exception lands map and the soils map. And so we're trying to pick up all these places where there's class 3, class 4, and 6 soils, anywhere where we have these yellow places. The court said, though, you do need to explore up here, north of Fox Ridge Road, a little bit further. And it also actually gave us tax lots that we needed to do that in. And the court said you did do a good job removing what we call Riverside North, so land just south of Cascade Steel, from further consideration for land needs, so we were able to take that out. So this is our new revised study area map based on that court decision, picking up the Fox Ridge land up here. Then the court said you've done a good job describing what you think are natural barriers for development. So in the middle in 2003, this Mcminnville said these are the things we want to stay west and north of the South Yamaha River. We want to stay south and west of the North Yamaha River, stay south of Baker Creek Road, and not cross south of Highway 18 west of the Yamaha River. So those were findings that were put together. The court upheld them. And so mapping that in our new study area, it shows all those barriers. This is Baker Creek. This is Highway 18. That's west of the Yamaha River. What it does is it creates this as our final study area map. based on those scenarios. And then we've added a little bit of property up here to it because we figured that it made sense to study this property up in this area as well. And we added a little piece up here that was just south of Baker Creek too, so that we could meet the full intent of the study areas. And this is our final study area map. And what it shows is anything in red here is what we call higher quality resource lands, and they're included in here because we may need to get infrastructure through these lands to serve these lands down here, so we have to study that. Anything that is in green is exception lands, and we're including, this is the area that we brought in addition. We're also including all the exception lands that came into the city in that first submittal because we have to examine how much need is going to be met in those areas as well. And then lower quality soils are in yellow. So this is what we'll be studying. So in terms of next steps, we'll then take that buildable land area and we'll take out floodplains, we'll take out steep slopes, we'll take out landslide hazards, and review any more physical barriers that may come up for considered buildable land. There's also, by law, we can take out natural resource conservation areas. As you know, easement came on the Shegwin farm after this mill north of Grand Haven. So we need to remove that because it doesn't allow any development. And then we're working on an infrastructure study with Jacobs Engineering for identifying lands that we can't serve with public facilities. And lastly, we're looking at hazard areas. So for hazard areas, goal 7 says cities need to protect people and property from natural hazards when we're doing growth planning. And just recently, the state is in a comment period. They just released their state hazard mitigation plan. There's a chapter on Yamhill County, which identifies that Yamhill County has high risk for landslides and earthquakes. Yamhill County has a draft of their natural hazard mitigation plan out right now. We have an addendum to that that is out right now as well. And we've just completed our Mcminnville hazard study for this growth discussion. So to show you what the results of that are, this shows you landslide soils in our study area. So red is high risk landslide soils, orange is moderate risk. So we're looking at that in terms of development capacity. Liquefaction is actually a big issue in Mcminnville, and we hadn't realized that until new data was released. So we have moderate liquefaction soils all around the city. In fact, the city's built on it right now. And then we have high risk liquefaction soils just surrounding the city. So this line that you see is a mile boundary that we've created for our study. And so anything that's in red here is high risk for liquefaction, which has been a big issue during an earthquake event. So we're looking at that as well. We're taking floodplains and floodways. We don't allow development in those. In the city of Mcminnville, so we're taking those out of the buildable lands too. Most of it's the border stuff, but there's one down here that we're looking at in terms of a study area. And then steep slopes. So out in this West Hill area, there's a lot of steep slopes, which is also where we see the landslides, so that makes sense. And we're taking that out as buildable lands as well.
Heather, can I interrupt you for a moment?
Yeah.
Can we get this the slide deck from you so that we can look at it more closely?
It's got a lot of information in it, and I'm just doing high level so you can review it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And then this is a composite hazard map that shows all the hazards identified together. And this is in a 1.5 mile boundary area if we did an urban reserve area afterwards, after the UGB. What we get out of this is, as you go further out from the city, the hazards are fairly significant. This darker blue area is liquefaction issues. This is significant shaking issues with a earthquake event, and then up here is landslides. So nestled closer to the city is the better development area than the light blue and going further out. So then the court said, once you determine what's buildable land, you determine where you're going to meet your land need for the city in terms of growth, and you go through this priority identification and how to apply it. So we need to look at orderly and economic provision of public facilities and services, how to retain agricultural lands that are defined as class 1 being the highest priority, so make sure that those are reserved at all possible costs for agricultural uses, and class 6 being the lowest priority. As I showed you, we have a lot of class 1 around the city of Mcminnville. And then what's the transition between proposed urban uses and nearby agricultural activities? And then we define our buildable lands map based on those criteria and that meet our local conditions and needs. And then we apply them in that priority structure into the study areas. So what we're doing is we're going to set up these screening criteria for goal 14 factors. And we're going to go through all the study area lands that have been identified as buildable and score them with the screening criteria. And it runs the gamut of what the factors are in the goal in terms of the public services and retaining agricultural land. We're also adding a few, which would be the ability to build affordable housing, because that's a big need in Mcminnville on these lands as well, and then hazard risk. Then we're going to put a metric basis behind that. So we're going to try to put some qualitative and quantitative analysis into this, where we're going to look at cost per acre, density, percentage. We're going to compare how development can occur on these different soils, and then whether it's suitable for future use. So we're trying, and we're going to end up with something similar to this chart that helps us identify where's the best place for the city of Mcminnville to grow adjacent to the city. So we're hoping that puts the science into the work. No one criteria or factor is determinate. So council and the Board of County Commission need to balance the pros and cons of the whole composite of these factors together when making a decision. And that's a very important part of the court remand that came back to us. The final outcome for all this is that we'll end up with a UGB expansion map that balances that priority structure of soils with the all 14 factors for determining the city's land need, interland need, for the direction of the court's decision. And that's what we'll be bringing to a hearing process for findings. So our next steps are, we're gonna launch our website next week. We're gonna give an update to the City Council on August 25th to bring back the buildable land map to them. The results of our serviceability analysis of how we conserve property with water, wastewater, and transportation. And then our first draft of our screening criteria, the goal 14 factors. We hope to schedule time with you to bring that to you as well. Then we hope by late September to have a draft UGB map from all this process. We'll write findings in late October and then go into meetings and public hearings in November and December. And that is, in essence, a very quick synopsis with a lot of data and work of where we're at with our UGB process and the City Council's decision to respond to the revamp from 2013.
Heather, this is Commissioner Olson. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
One question going back in many years as I've been involved in this at the city level too, what is now the consideration, or what's considered maximum building slope? 30
By
degrees?
state law.
by state law.
Excuse me.
Okay, I'm gonna ask DJ to answer that.
That's right. She's got a lot of experts with her today.
Yeah, I can you hear me?
We
Sure
can.
So by law, land with slopes greater than 25% are considered unbuildable. If you have a parcel with land that's got 20% slope, technically that's buildable, but it's challenging. And we are actually working with Portland State University graduate students to try and determine at what slope the challenge of building retaining walls and building roads and building support for foundations drop below a threshold where it's not constraining development. So you're asking really two questions. What's the legal standard? The legal standard is 25%. What's the reasonable standard where you can only build executive housing or very expensive housing? I'm not sure what the answer to that question is yet. We're trying to discover that.
Okay, no, the 25% gives me what I really wanted to know,
Okay.
and
And then I put the map up for the steep slopes area, and so red is the 25% on the map. The city of Mcminnville also has a policy for development of any homes that are accessed from a road that has a slope greater than 15% need to be sprinkled because of fire access issues.
okay, thanks.
So that
That answers my questions.
So, are there any other questions, and are you concerned about the process or comfortable with the joint, the consideration of joint public meetings and public hearings with the city council?
Heather, this is Mary Starrett. I had a couple of questions. First, what is your best guess, looking at, the past being prologue here, in terms of the chances of there being no appeal with the end result? What your best end result would be?
So if you ask me what my hope would be.
That wasn't the question.
We'll get to that.
Distinctly different.
We follow the court decision, and that we are able to put together a plan that meets the letter of the law, and that the opponents feel meet the letter of the law, and everyone recognizes that Mcminnville needs to be able to move forward with its growth plan at this point in time, because we've been doing this for so long and it's crippled the city. If you ask me if I was a betting person in the planning world, the history of Mcminnville is everything has been challenged. When I look at the record, every decision-making point was challenged. So I don't know what the future looks like. We are in conversation with our opponents. I think they want to see something be successful in Mcminnville as well. But I can't wager a bet on that.
So if this were to happen, so let's say you come up with a plan and then there's an appeal, what are we looking at in terms of, again, a timeline for dealing with that? We're looking at how long this has languished, if you will.
I think I'll defer that to Spencer Parsons, who is our legal counsel, because he's probably more aware of how things are trending in the court system.
Yeah, so I would, two points to that question. One is we've got a track record here to look at a timeline on what that takes. But from a practical standpoint, if the city renders a final decision and it goes through the LCDP process, the Court of Appeals has a statute where they're supposed to render a decision within, I think, 6 months from the date of that, of the appeal, but they do have the discretion to extend that for questions that they deem novel or significant state importance. Mcminnville has kind of been on the cutting edge here as far as these kind of questions regarding UGB into areas where there aren't enough options other than valuable land to expand onto. So I'd say, you know, the short answer is we're looking at a long-term process in the event that there are challenges and appeals.
Thank you. And so early on, there was a mention of a statewide fix. I know Mcminnville is not alone in these challenges. We've seen it virtually every city. Is there any discussion of looking at, number one, Senate Bill 101 and how that's pretty much been limiting for expansion, and if there would be a consideration of looking at a legislative fix? And then the other question is we know that SDCs oftentimes can cripple expansion to some degree. Looking at the various ways that we can mitigate this with a fix to Senate Bill 101, the Oregon's land use law that limits buildable land, and also SDCs.
So I can share with you, Commissioner, that City Council, when we brought to them the laundry list of these other different paths we can take for growth planning, we did put legislative fix on the table for one of those paths. And City Council did have a very intentional and thoughtful dialogue about whether the legislative fix would be specific to Mcminnville's need or whether it would lead a charge about the land use system. And they landed on that they needed to focus on the city of Mcminnville's need, not lead the charge for changing the land use system. So the direction we received was pursue the, respond to the remand that we received and do the work, but also at the same time putting together the communications for a legislative fix for Mcminnville if that is needed.
Thank you. And one more question. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
One thing I would add to Heather's comment regarding your question on SDCs. That's the statute that allows cities and counties and other service providers, park districts, to impose SDCs specifically says that the application of those fees is not a land use decision. And so it is regulated under a different statute, and there's nothing in the land use system that would fix the SDC problem that you're describing. There's also nothing that is going to eliminate the cost of extending services for growth. So that I think is a completely different set of questions, and it's not really regulated through the land use process.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you
But
for
to
the
your point,
clarification.
Commissioner Spirit, in Mcminnville, we have some of the lowest SDC fees actually throughout the state for a city our size. One of the reasons is we don't have a water SDC, so Mcminnville Water and Light does not impose a water SDC. And when we're looking at our growth patterns, I showed you that area that's in the West Hills where we don't have water infrastructure yet. We call that zone 2. If the infrastructure to be built in that area to provide water, the cost will be borne by the homes that are served by that infrastructure. So right now, we have a development that's been approved in that area, but we can't get the infrastructure built because the cost to be borne by the homes amounts to like $15,000 to $20,000 a home. So we are looking at what does that mean as well in terms of future costs for development.
Makes sense. Thank you. I
That's
just
good
had
answer.
one more question about the joint, the process with City Council and Board of Commissioners. And just weighing in on this, I see these as two distinct functions. The City Council has one function and one jurisdiction, and then the Board of Commissioners follows up with that. Looking at some of the processes in the past with other cities, other jurisdictions, I would just want to suggest that we keep the processes separate in that there are two distinct reasons, if you will, for each jurisdiction. That's just my initial thought.
Yeah, and I'll have some follow-up. Maybe Heather has a answer,
Okay.
but Heather, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, that's gonna be a decision-making process for you as the board. I can tell you the basis for the joint meetings in the past, when this process was rolling through, and Ken Friday might know better than I, because he was part of that, was that you were hearing the same public testimony as two decision-making bodies. You deliberate on your own as decision-making body to make your own independent decisions, but you're hearing the same public testimony.
And I guess my follow-up would be, I don't know if this is what Commissioner Sarah is thinking, but I would appreciate just making sure that we have a separate deliberation time. But maybe is that something similar, or do you want to clarify?
Well, yeah, no, and I think that's important. So if, there would be some wisdom in kind of, not repeating the same testimony and just for time, but looking at that and then ending that. And so it's not something where we're having deliberations on the same night with two separate jurisdictions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I would say that I would support that, but I'm curious if Heather has more thoughts, or maybe Ken Friday. We're going to go with Ken first because he lifted his face shield.
Well, I would just say that if you're planning for 3 meetings, I could see a way that you might be able to get it done in 2 meetings, and maybe that 3rd meeting is just there as a placeholder in case, because things come up. But I can see the wisdom in hearing the testimony at the same time. It has been awkward in the past, sometimes having both the council and the board there voting at the same time. But it just depends on the issue as to whether you want to go back and review the information and make a vote at a different meeting, at maybe a board hearing, something like that. But I guess I'm wondering if public testimony is taken. Let's say that the city presents this, you take public testimony at one hearing. I guess I'm curious, what are the other 2 hearings for?
Okay, are you asking me that, Ken?
Yes.
I think that's for you, Heather.
So we put in the process the opportunity for 2 public hearings and then a meeting for deliberation. And the reason for that is if the decision-making body wants to continue the public hearing based on the amount of public testimony.
Okay, so 1 hearing, public testimony, possible continuation, given the possibility there may be a lot, and then a 3rd for deliberation, is what you
We just wanted
proposed.
to make sure we were scheduling enough time for the decision-making bodies to hear from the public the way they did to hear from the public, and for you to deliberate and make your decisions.
Mm-hmm. And then Commissioner Sarah, I want to bring this back to you.
No, I would just want to make sure we're clear on the distinction between the 2 jurisdictions.
Yeah. And that's why I could see a separate deliberation for us than for the city, but.
And I think
Okay,
that's
sure.
the way it should be. And I go back to what Ken Friday said, what our direction said, is that we do have 2 separate responsibilities. This having both bodies vote on the same night or the same session, I don't think is work. I don't think it's a good idea, but I do think getting 1 meeting so we're all hearing the same public testimony, but then the council does their thing and we sit back and do our own deliberations. I think that's the way it should be.
So Heather, we're not really sure what the distance guidelines and the public meetings situation will be in November and December. So what are we looking at for that accommodation?
Sure.
So we would have to coordinate with your team. We've been doing public hearings over a Zoom meeting, and it's been working fairly well for the city. So that would obviously be something that we would want to coordinate with your administrative staff as to the best process to allow. What we want to do is ensure that we're not limiting the number of people who can participate.
And what about written testimony We've oftentimes done that, and I'm not happy about it, but we've limited oral testimony and just gone with written testimony, which is not optimal.
Yeah, so I believe the public meeting law right now is, and legal counsel can correct me if I'm wrong, is cities allow for written testimony in advance of the public hearing, oral testimony at the public hearing. Oral testimony can be provided in person if the right social distancing protocols are put in place and maximum capacity. And oral testimony can be provided virtually.
Yeah, that's right, essentially.
Thank you.
But we would coordinate that with your administrative team.
All right, any other questions?
No, I think that's a good idea. I think having one testimony, and it's evident everybody's getting used to Teams and everybody's getting used to Zoom, that we could still, we as a body, we could be in a session, the city council could be in a session, where we're all watching the same
Right.
we're all watching the same testimonies. So.
Yeah,
Makes sense.
We'd have to look at the mechanics, but essentially in order to do that, we'd be opening, they'd be opening city council, you'd be
Yep.
opening the commissioner session,
Mhm.
you know, so
Yes.
it's running concurrent in the same location.
Right.
yeah,
In
or
this-
we could be here and they could be there too.
Right.
Concurrent. Yeah, okay.
Because the actions and the deliberation, it would have to be done separately if it was taken, if the board was taking actions, and throw it to Christian a little more on the procedures of that. But of course, you know, if there was deliberation and a vote taken by the board, you'd be doing that. You know, the three of you would be having that discussion and that vote. Even if if everybody was in the same room, if we're all in the same location, you would basically, you know, it would close and then whatever order it needs to occur, I'm assuming the city would take action first.
Depends on what the board wants. I mean, if you want your own meeting and opportunity to deliberate, then we could set it up that way.
Yeah.
That's the way I think it should.
But I think there's there's unanimity on that.
Whether we
Consensus.
decide to do it that night or whether we decide to do it the next week or
Mhm.
whenever, that's fine as long as we are actually deliberating and making decision just this body.
Correct.
Yeah,
I mean,
Agreed.
with the board meeting at least once a week, that
Yeah.
should be
yeah,
doable.
yeah, totally.
And then just looking at, you know, as much for the noticing requirements and everything else associated with the hearing. And probably rely on Ken and Todd to get feedback on that.
Yeah. Have any more thoughts, Ken?
Nope.
Okay. Looked like you may.
No.
Okay, great. Any further questions for Heather?
No, I think Heather, thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Thank you,
very
everybody
much.
there
It
at the
was
city.
very
Appreciate it.
informing. The only thing I can say is, when the city decided not to pursue our urban growth boundary, we all thought it was a mistake, but it was the wise thing to do, and it's just too bad now. 10 years later, we're going back, or 12 years later, we're going back revisiting it again. But I understand, and I think your presentation was very good.
Yes, very nice.
Heather, the growing mindfully, growing Mcminnville mindfully, there's an outline. Is that it almost looks like it's the 1 mile out.
Oh, and the
Very well done, Commissioner.
Oh, thank you.
Funny.
grand
It's
prize.
the liminal method, Gene.
Yes,
Ah.
and I just want to point out, before, obviously you are aware of the challenges with having class 1 soil inside of a UGB. So, surrounded on all sides by a UGB. I presume that you know that will produce consternation from many.
Yes.
Okay, great. I just want to put that out there before you know these things.
No secret there.
So we got to figure that out.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for your time.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Heather.
We will send the slide deck to your staff and continue to coordinate with county staff.
That sounds great.
Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
Thanks,
And
everybody.
thank your team for doing it.
All right, with that, we will conclude this work session and move on to the consent agenda. And thanks for getting everything set up. I know Carrie's not here, but she had a hand in that. So thanks, Carrie. Move on to consent agenda, item E, and we have none. Move on to old business, which is item F, and we have none today. Move on to item G, which is other business. And item G1 is consideration of approval of amendment number 12 to an agreement between Yamaha County Health and Human Services and Lutheran Community Services Northwest, which is Board Order 12-555 for Oregon Health Plan Services in the amount of $1,596,231.60, retroactive to July 1st of 2020 through June 30th of 2021. And Commissioner Sterrett, would you like to add anything?
I would just add that this is a 2% increase, and also there's an increase in staffing for the youth behavioral services and the school-based programs. Also, this is part of the CCO's Student Success Initiative.
Right.
So it's just pretty cut and dry.
Yes.
I'll
All
make a recommendation that we approve.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Record showing unanimous approval of item G1. Item G2 is consideration of approval of amendment number 3 to an agreement between Yamaha County Sheriff's Office and Homeward Bound Pets Humane Society, also known as Board Order 17-375, extending the agreement for dog processing and kenneling services, retroactive to July 1st of 2020 through June 30th of 2022.
We're laughing about the wording, but it's high time that this finally comes to us. So this is a happy day.
My only question was is, since this is really the second year, if we wanted to go 1 year or 2 year contract, 'cause that's for two years, or do we really want to? Do we trust the Homeward Bound, which I think we do, enough to go with a 2-year contract instead of just going a 1-year contract?
This is, as I understand, this is just for the kenneling, not for the clerical services, right? Because we already proved that.
Right, but this is 2 years.
Yes, this is. Yeah.
Other than that, I don't have an issue.
All right. Well, then I would move approval of item G2. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Record showing unanimous approval of item G2. Item G3 is consideration of approval of intergovernmental agreement number 143-20 between Yamaha County Solid Waste Department and the Oregon State Department of Environmental Quality for the installation of 8 gas monitoring probes at the closed Newberg landfill site in an amount not to exceed $100,000, effective through December 31st of 2022. And we have Ashley here. We also have Ken Friday. So if you have any questions. But I appreciated the memo. I thought it had a lot of details that were very helpful to me.
Yeah, me too. So.
Yeah.
And the whole reasoning behind this, the impetus for it in terms of the residential development.
Yes, exactly. That's a really good clarification. There are homes being built increasingly close to the landfill,
Right.
especially in the upside.
Mhm.
Yeah. So thanks for all the work on it.
Thank you.
It's good to see this before us.
Thank
Sorry
you.
you had to sit through this whole meeting, Ashley, to not get any questions. But
But you got a bunch of thumbs ups.
Yeah.
So
Mean that you did the memo correctly.
yes, I think
Thank
so.
you.
the memo
Yes.
was
Not off the
good.
hook yet, there hasn't been a motion.
That's right.
Right.
I would move that we approve, or unless there are further comments, I would move that we approve item G3. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The record show unanimous approval of item G3. Now you're off the hook. Yeah. And thanks for being here. Item G4 is consideration of approval of an agreement between Yamhill County and Barry, Dunn, McNeil, and Parker LLC, DBA Barry Dunn, for the Enterprise Resource Planning, also known as the ERP Consulting Project, in the amount of $531,754. And Ken, do you have anything you would like to add?
I don't.
Okay, that's okay.
I believe Mike Barnhart provided them a memorandum
Yes.
to go with this, and so you had already approved the notice to proceed, and with awarding the contract. So this is the contract coming for you for our financial system.
All right, thank you. Any other thoughts, commissioners?
No,
It's good to see this before
I'll make
us.
a recommendation that we approve item number 4, and that's an agreement between Yamaha County and Barry Dunn. Deal and Parker LLC.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The record show unanimous approval of item G4. Item G5 is consideration of approval of service element prior authorization, also known as SEPA, number 38037897, under agreement 157846 between Yamaha County and the Oregon Department of Human Services, which is Board Order 19-221, for the financing of community developmental disability services in the amount of $7,919,752.12, retroactive from July 1st of 2019 through June 30th of 2021. Commissioner Sterrett, do you have anything you'd
Just
like
to
to add?
pass through.
Yep. Yeah. The first time I saw these, I was like, huh.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah. Especially, I think there's like a $45 million one that comes
Right.
through. Yes.
Right.
Somebody could pass it through my pocket.
Okay. I would happy to consider a motion then to approve.
So moved.
All right. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The record show unanimous approval of item G5. Item G6 is consideration of approval of a sale deed for tax lot R3325BC 03500, a parcel of undeveloped real property acquired by the county through property tax foreclosure to the city of Dundee for $3,000 plus costs. The property was already declared surplus on April 18th of 2019 by board order number 19-116. It's a good clarification. And Christian, it's nice to see us before us. Do you have any thoughts?
This is just a parcel in the city of Dundee. We notified adjacent landowners, including the city, that the property was surplus and available. We had the city and another property owner bidding, and the city ultimately bid the higher amount. So this is a quick claim deed to deed that property over to the city of Dundee.
Another one that's great to see before us.
Yeah.
So thank you. Another thing to check off of Christian's list. Commissioners, do you have any other thoughts?
I think for the city of Dundee, it's a good deal, and I think it'll be vital in their growth, too, so.
Okay.
I would move approval.
Thank you. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The record show unanimous approval of item G6. Thank you, Christian.
Mhm.
Item G7 is consideration of approval of the purchase of 17 Lenovo ThinkPads X1 Carbon Gen 8 laptops, 28 ThinkCenter M75Q-1 micro desktops, and one ThinkPad X1 Carbon laptop with 4G capability from Lenovo in the amount of $42,433. And or, you know,
Well, I guess
so
my
any thoughts?
understanding is to provide more. I don't think this many would be required if it wasn't for what we were doing because of COVID response.
Mhm.
Employees working from home, but we have to make sure that all of our employees have the correct information, or correct tools to do their job efficiently.
Right.
And I think this would be good.
Well, this is part of the capital replacement fund that we also have in place. So, you know, we charge departments, we build up that capital reserve fund for replacement to make sure that we have the most up-to-date, you know, that we don't have equipment that's outside of the service period as well. Just have
And,
that.
and can our, on capital improvement, our PCs, Shane, if I remember Shane right, you'll be able to answer this, was 2 years? We don't go on a 3-year cycle, we go on a 2-year cycle.
If I remember right, I think laptops are 2 years, desktops are 4 years.
4 years.
But I can confirm that with Shane.
No, that's fine.
It actually, and we typically get a little bit more than that. If anything, we're actually probably running a little bit behind on replacement because we do have a lot of equipment that has been deployed out to facilitate telework, and so that presents some challenges in replacing equipment. So, so this is the first round in trying to get caught up on some of those replacements.
Mr. Chair, I will make a recommendation that we approve the purchase as stated in item number 7.
All right, thank you. All in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed, same sign. Record show unanimous approval of item G7. Item D8 is consideration of approval of the purchase of Palo Alto 3220 firewalls from Techheads to upgrade the county network security system in the amount of $77,122.
Ken, I'll let you
This is one, we've
Yeah.
had this identified as a project again, security and network security is critical. And we always need to make sure that we have our systems that are up to date and in place. And I think it's even more now with the current situation. We need to make sure that our network is secure. So this is a major project to upgrade our firewalls.
Yeah, and I appreciated the descriptions by Shane. All right, well, I would move, unless there are further comments, I would move approval of item G8. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Record show unanimous approval of item G8. Item G9 is consideration of authorizing the sale and closing of tax lot R4421CC 00500, a parcel of undeveloped real property acquired by the county through property tax foreclosure, to Susanna Corona for $19,592.78, including half of the fees and closing costs. The property was already declared surplus on April 30th of 2020 by board order number 20-148. And Christian, do you have anything you'd like to add? I think we
Yeah.
all know the history of this one.
This
But
is actually, it's not an undeveloped piece of property. It's developed. This is the property at 813 Southeast 4th Street that we
Right.
originally declared surplus to be sold to the city of Mcminnville. When we were working through our due diligence, we got back in contact with the prior owner. And after conversations with the prior owner in the city was willing to allow us to proceed and try to see if we couldn't sell the property back to the previous owner, and that's what this would accomplish. And the city's on board. We've canceled that transaction, so this would replace that, and we'll be working with the same title company. So once this is approved, you're also authorizing the closing.
Yes.
I'm hoping that this will take no more than a few more weeks to complete.
okay. Well, thank you. That seemed like very serendipitous.
Just for clarification for what's actually before we do, we just need to strike the undeveloped from the record.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, it's the right tax lot, so
Okay, so just strike undeveloped. I just want to make sure, for the record.
totally fine.
For the discussion. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, realistically, it does say or. I actually thought it was of. So
Right.
as or, it probably is fine.
and it'll be sold with a quick claim deed.
Okay.
So
Okay, great.
Great.
okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Could entertain a motion
Oh.
to.
I would
Sorry.
move approval of item G9.
Thank you. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The record show unanimous approval of item G9. Item G10 is consideration of approval of amendment number 1 to grant agreement number 1034 between Yamhill County and the State of Oregon Department of Administrative Services, is board order 20-183, to receive funding through the Coronavirus Relief Fund for expenditures incurred due to COVID-19 during the period of March 1st of 2020 through December 30th of 2020. And Ken, did you have anything more to add? Thank you for adding it to the agenda.
No, this was something that I just received this week, and I just wanted to make sure, because we just did our second round of reimbursement requests, and I wanted to make sure we're not held up on releasing the fund. But the state sent this out this week. It's an amendment, and essentially it's a replacement to the prior agreement that the board had taken action on when we had done the first round of CRF funds. And a lot of the changes or amendments to it were discussions that they were having with other jurisdictions as well. And then it does also, it's the first time I've seen in an actual formalized agreement, the amount that we actually have,
I noticed that too.
in an agreement
Yeah.
that shows how much is, available for us for reimbursement.
Yeah.
The only thing that I would share on that is based on the reimbursements that I've submitted so far, just as a quick update, we're coming up that we've spent about a third of what we
Yeah.
have available. So we have just over $1 million in reimbursement requests that we've submitted for the first two rounds of the 3.6 million.
Thank you.
And
I'll make a motion. We approve.
I would say before that, that I got a phone call this morning from Jody Christensen, kind of describing in more detail the childcare project that Craig Pope is working
Yes,
on.
I have
And you
that.
followed up on it too, I'm
Oh,
sure.
yeah.
But that's, it would be nice to get some confirmation that we could use funding through the CRF for that.
Right. I've got an outline if you want me to forward that to you.
That sounds great.
What he's,
Yeah.
Yeah,
what
thank
he's
you. I've
doing.
only heard it, in
Okay, I'll
audio
send you
format.
that.
I'd be happy to take a, if you send me the project description, if there's questions about CRF funding eligibility, I have I have a whole file on CRF, so I can take a look at that.
Great, Commissioner Jarrett, you can do that.
I will do that.
Yes. Okay, well, you were about to make a motion.
I
Somebody
was
was.
gonna make,
Oh, yeah.
I was gonna make a motion that we approve item number 10, that's approval of amendment 1 to the grant agreement 1034 between Yamaha County and the state of Oregon.
All right, thank you. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Record show unanimous approval of item G10. Thank you, Ken. Item D11 is consideration of approval to appoint Patrice Coleman and Alexis Avery to the Yamhill County Mental Health and Developmental Disabilities Advisory Committee, each term to expire May of 2022.
And I want to say that I've been a part of this advisory committee for 6 years, and it's one of the most significant ways we hear from people in our community that we serve.
Yeah.
And they do serve on this committee. And I do want to say that I know Alexis. I can't speak to Patrice. I'm sure she's quite qualified, but I'm very glad to see that we're getting people who really do are going to be able to have a voice at this advisory board. So I would move approval.
Great. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The record show unanimous approval of item G11. All right, thank you, Commissioner. Item G12 is consideration of approval to appoint Andrew Mortensen to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board for a 4-year term to expire July 30th, 2024. And Commissioner, do you have anything you'd like to add to
Well, the
that?
only thing I'd like to add to that, and I'll just go back to my thing, I think on reappointments should be, all reappointments, if they do the job, should be approved. I still believe that we don't do a great job of advertising for new committee assignments. We put them on our website,
Mhm.
but if you don't look at Yamhill County's website, you don't know that those positions exist.
Mhm.
So I guess my only thing is I'd like to see on new appointments, not reappointments. On new appointments, I'd like to see a little more advertising done, like in the newsletter, all the people, so if they don't look at our website, they still know that application exists. I mean, if they can apply for that position.
Agreed.
The only thing that I would highlight for this one are some of the challenges. This is one of those boards that I think could present a challenge for doing an advertising. I think we have interest levels for certain boards or commissions to where you have more interest or more of a peak interest. Where the Parks Board, it's such a large board with a number of positions. I'm not sure right off the top of my head how many vacancies, but a number of these vacancies have been vacant for quite some time.
Yeah, but, and I think part of the reason, that's part of the reason is because number one, how they're advertised, and I agree that definitely with what Ken said, that certain people have a certain interest in certain committees,
Mhm.
but I don't think that alleviates. Well, let's say if we got 10 applicants, and he might have been, based on his interest, he might have been the one appointed. But if nobody else knows that the position really exists, I can guarantee he's gonna be the only one appointed. So, and I think they do a very good job, but I do think whether they're appointed or not appointed to the committees of their areas of interest, I think we should still let them know that there's
That there's an opening. Yeah, I mean, I know that we made it really clear to people the opening on the Planning Commission, and I think there were 22 applicants for that open position. So,
Yeah, and that's why I think that does
Yeah.
good. Still might have picked the same person, but
right.
But with that being said, I'll move that we approve the appointment of Andrew Mortensen to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board for a 4-year term.
Okay, thank you. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Record show unanimous approval of item G12. And I second Commissioner Olson's comments is that I would like to see, sometimes I know when there's an opening and the website doesn't actually reflect that. Also, that's been a regular thing. So
And it's pretty common.
I think it would be.
It's the city of Mcminnville and the city of Newburgh in the graphic.
Mhm.
They always have a little box that says like, the city of Mcminnville has
Yeah.
openings on the following committees, and this is how you turn in an application, so.
Yeah.
But anyway.
I know we've had an opening for, on Northwest Seniors Disability
Oh, yeah.
for several of those openings in terms of clients and those advisory committees. Those have been vacant for a number of years, and we do have somebody serving on one. But yeah, I guess it depends on the level of what is someone's area of interest. And also the ones that are less politically charged seem to have less interest.
Yeah, and I think you're right, Commissioner, that, but I still don't think it allows us to, or it alleviates us from knowing all citizens. It's like somebody you said, if they're not really good qualifications, they're gonna wash out. I mean, they're not gonna meet. If we still have openings, we still have
Right.
openings. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think an example of this is somebody emailed me recently and they're like, here are some of my experiences and here's some of my interests, and I want to be involved in the county. And I looked at the list and I was like, I'm pretty sure that this list isn't everything, but here's a starting point.
Mhm.
Yeah, but that's not like even then the list is incomplete. That's on the website sometimes.
Right.
We can work on that though. All right, we will move on to item G13, which is consideration of adopting resolution 20-07-30-1 proclaiming August 9th through the 15th of 2020 as National Health Center Week. And I asked that have this place on the agenda because Virginia Garcia is part of the national celebrating health centers. And they've been a great partner with us during coronavirus, and
Absolutely.
especially being at the fairgrounds as long as they were. So,
and they do a great job.
yeah.
Very much so. I would move approval.
Okay.
Generally, commissioners, we read these into the record before we
Oh, that's right. Okay.
I remembered enough to pause at that. Let
If
me
you
pull
could
it up.
speed read, Casey, or just read just the high points.
All right, in the Board of Commissioners for the State of Oregon, for the County of Yamhill County, sitting for the transaction of county business in the matter of a resolution in support of National Health Center Week, August 9th through 15th of 2020. Whereas for over 45 years, Virginia Garcia Memorial Health Center, a part of the nationwide network of community health centers, has provided high-quality, affordable, comprehensive primary and preventive care to our county's underserved communities, delivering value to and having a significant impact on our region's healthcare system. And whereas health centers like Virginia Garcia are a critical element of the health system, serving both rural and urban communities, and often providing the only accessible and dependable source of primary care in the communities. And whereas everyday Virginia Garcia develops new approaches to integrating a wide range of services beyond primary care, including oral health, vision, behavioral health, and pharmacy services to meet the needs and challenges of our diverse community. And whereas the health center model at Virginia Garcia continues to prove an effective means of overcoming barriers to healthcare access, including geography, income, and insurance status, improving healthcare outcomes, and reducing healthcare costs. And whereas health centers like Virginia Garcia reduce overall costs of care by helping manage patients' chronic conditions, keeping them out of costlier healthcare settings like hospital emergency rooms. And whereas health centers like Virginia Garcia are on the front lines of emerging healthcare crises, providing access to care for our veterans, our nation's veterans, addressing the opioid epidemic, and responding to public health threats, including COVID-19. And whereas right here in Yamhill County, we are home to 5 Virginia Garcia sites, 2 primary care clinics, 2 dental clinics, and a full-service school-based health center. These sites serve 12,001 patients, or 1 in 9 residents, and employ 90 people. And whereas National Health Center Week offers us the opportunity to celebrate Virginia Garcia's delivery sites, their dedicated staff, board members, patients, and all those responsible for the continued success and growth since Virginia Garcia opened their doors more than 45 years ago. Now, therefore, the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners do hereby proclaim the week of August 9th through the 15th, 2020 as National Health Center Week, and encourage all residents to learn more about their local community health center and take part in this week by following them on social media, lending your voice in advocacy, and if possible, donating to their work. That wasn't so long, was it?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Here's another one. I would move approval.
That's right.
Yours
All-
is shorter. I like yours better.
That's right. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Let the record show unanimous approval of item G13.
13.
13, thank you. Thank you, commissioners. Item G14 is consideration of adopting resolution 20-07-30-2, extending the declaration of a state of emergency within Yamhill County. And Ken and Christian.
This
or
is also a
Christian put
board
together.
order, so you don't need to read this one into the record. It's both a board order and a resolution.
That's right.
But we had this conversation last week. The previous emergency declaration was extended through the end of July. This, the draft before you would extend the existing declaration through September 30th. We took a look back at the original declaration and most, if not all, of the needs that were identified in that declaration, I think are still needs today. And so this is before you today to extend the existing declaration through the end of September.
Patrice, do you have any thoughts or more questions?
No, I remember when we first discussed this last week about whether it would be for 1 month or 2 months. And I suggested that there's no doubt things aren't going to change in 2 months. So it'd be 2 months going to the end of September before we'd have to come back. Or if the governor's declaration is first. So.
Well, thank you for providing us with an updated one. And Christian and Ken and I talked a little bit about the reasons why we would want to do this. So I feel comfortable with extending it on those, based upon those reasons.
I'll make a motion that we adopt resolution 20-07-30-2, extending the declaration of the state of emergency of Indiana.
All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. The record show unanimous approval of item G14. Thank you, Christian.
Yeah.
You've done a lot for us today. All right, item G15 is discussion of a letter in response to an executive order on building and rebuilding monuments to American heroes. And it says Commissioner Sterrett, so I'm going to send it off to you, but we also received the same email.
Okay. So as you know, we did receive an email from the Secretary of the Interior asking whether or not we would sign on to list some of our assets in terms of locations for possible monuments or statues in our county. I spoke with our administrator regarding what some of those options would be. They're kind of limited. I think you said, Ken, it would be Grenfell Park and Rogers Landing. So we're not exactly in the caliber of maybe what they're looking for as far as massive area,
Sure.
area of natural lands.
Yeah, and I'll just expand, because, looking at our property inventory and especially looking at parks and things like that, our parks system, there could be further discussions with Jared about that, but I just relied on my past experience and knowing the park system and the map plans. They're really limited in size and acreage, and also it's a slightly different mission. The types of parks that we have are really small, so not necessarily conducive to that. And then other than that, we're really looking at campus grounds, around the courthouse or possibly fairgrounds, but then fairgrounds, you kind of fall into that primary mission or kind of operationally, they maximize every square inch of that property during fair time when they have fairs on typical years. So.
And the other question is, they're asking if we have any statues that we can donate to this effort. I think that what we have is pretty minimal. We have one.
Our doughboy,
Yeah. So I don't know if that's pretty much limits us from a response, but I would recommend that we respond by saying we would like to sign on support for an area that would honor monuments and statues, but that we really don't have anything to contribute at this time.
Can we, that makes sense. I don't think that maybe I don't actually, and maybe I'm not reading this correctly. It seems like the Doughboy, the World War I statue, if we're not giving it to somebody, physically moving it somewhere, it could be part of, it could be officially part of a national garden of heroes.
I have talked to representatives of Oregon Mutual,
Okay.
and they're looking at potentially giving me one in the plaque and everything.
Yeah.
that they have an Oregon Mutual to the national.
Leonard DeWitt.
Yeah.
I just don't know how that works, so I understand that might be.
Because he.
I certainly don't want to be the one offering a statue. to
No,
somebody.
I don't, I'm not.
Well, Leonard DeWitt would definitely be one of those that would deserve to be in a national park.
I don't see that we have anything
We don't have, other than our dome.
to
But if you
contribute.
want to, would you be up for drafting a letter? And I'm happy to
Yeah,
support
we'll
it.
To suggest that statue?
Oh, no,
No,
the one you
just-
first.
Oh, okay, so
suggested.
basically to
Support,
say
yeah.
that we'll support a garden of monuments
Yeah.
and statues, and that at this time, we really don't
Yeah.
have anything.
Have anything, any.
I know, I did the quick head
Inventory.
scan, yeah.
Okay,
And
so,
just to clarify, so for the record, if anybody's watching the Bill Noy that we're referring to, it's the Veterans Memorial
The Veterans
Statue.
Memorial.
Yeah, I just wonder because he's a World War I dome.
Yeah, right at the edge of the
Right.
detention center. in the
But I know
White
it
House.
also, it recognizes other from the county that have served in other wars, I believe. I haven't been out there and looked at it
Yeah.
in a little while.
I'll tell you, one thing about that statue that's always intriguing, you talk to a lot of people in Mcminnville, they don't even know that statue exists,
Mm.
because when it's elevated, when you
Right.
come down.
Right, you can't see it.
Evans
yeah.
Street, if you're going north on Evans Street, you hardly can see it. Coming south, you don't pay attention. I like to see that, this is just me, but I like to see that statue, maybe the corner of the Fenton House or someplace where it's more
mhm.
obvious, where you see it a lot. A lot of people don't see it, a lot of people don't see it up there.
There's a possibility we could be having that discussion.
I was just thinking that.
Yeah.
But it is something to
That's
keep in
right,
mind,
we could be having that discussion.
Yeah, it is definitely something to keep in mind is that it doesn't have to be fixed there in order to serve its purpose.
That's right.
So do we need a vote here, or is this simply just regarding the president's executive order on rebuilding statues? A lot of statues have been destroyed, and this is sort of a way to show affection and gratitude to heroes. And then there's a list of all of the suggested people who could be honored. But do we need a vote?
No, I think we already voted to have you draft a letter.
There
Really,
hasn't been a-
Casey?
No, there hasn't been a vote, yeah. And it's due by the end of tomorrow.
Yeah, so I would
So
just
probably-
send it, and they want it digitally. I would just say that we support a garden, a monument garden, but we don't have anything to contribute at this
Yeah.
time.
Well, I would move approval of that very simple letter.
A very simple letter to be
Yeah.
done by Commissioner Stair.
Exactly.
much.
We're giving you homework. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, same sign. The record show unanimous approval of giving Commissioner Starrett the assignment of writing the brief letter.
You have it now.
Okay, thank you for bringing it up. I didn't know where to go when I read the email, so I'm glad that you did the homework on it.
It's kind of a interesting request.
Yeah, I thought so too, and especially the list of the 31 names. It's like,
Well, I know
Okay.
a lot of people, when they decided way back when, the Vietnam Memorial was not a thing to do.
No,
Like, now look at it.
right. Right.
I think this would be a very good. I like the idea myself.
I do think it would be interesting to consider a more prominent location for the war memorial that we do have.
Mhm.
All right, well, thank you. And we'll move on to item H, which is public hearings, and we have none today. Move on to item I, which is announcements and commissioners.
Well, the only thing I have, I was made aware yesterday, and I haven't seen it, won't be, probably the press conference today, is that, and I heard this from several restaurant owners, and that the governor today may be, under mandates, may be rolling restaurants and bars back to phase one, to go farther than the 2 hours, and just roll them all back to phase one. I haven't seen that anyplace formally, Regional Solutions or the governor's website, but I guess we'll know when we see her, whatever she announces today.
Maybe you have more information, but can you remind me of the difference between phase one and phase two for, is it just the capacity issue with restaurants?
Yeah, well, number one, you can use, and that's your 6 feet thing, you can use every other booth.
Oh, right.
You know,
Right.
you couldn't service, you could only do takeout service, you couldn't do on-premises service.
Oh, with phase one?
And
That
then
was
there-
baseline.
The partitions were not allowed at
The
that point.
partitions is what I was thinking about.
And that's
yeah.
why they set the every other booth, to make sure that 60, or that 6 feet distancing was placed. I don't know what she's gonna do. Casey, did you hear any what she's?
I was gonna say that Commissioner Sterrett was making
I was making
she was making eyebrow movements.
I was making eyebrows at you, Commissioner Olson. So just a call yesterday with Leo Horner from the governor's office, and just a couple of questions that we had about the travel restrictions, because we thought there was going to be more guidance this week. They said early this
Oh,
week.
Yeah.
So they said at this point, when it came to travel restrictions, they were not sure at this point what that would look like. They know that they're concerned about travel into Oregon. And so what their original plan was to limit travel into Oregon for recreation if coming from a hotspot state. As you know, if you look on airlines or different states' websites, there are a list of states that are considered. If you've traveled to this city or this state, you have to quarantine for 14 days.
Right.
So that was the initial restriction, but it did not include business. So I was trying to figure out how do you just make that distinction? And I believe, I might be wrong, but the interstate commerce clause might make it impossible to limit travel for
interesting.
business. I don't know.
That may be because I think that was part of one of the original EOs in the state too, was that they allowed for necessary business travel.
And commerce, right.
Yeah.
So right now, there are no travel restrictions.
Right.
But what they're trying to do is be in line with California and Washington. They say Idaho is a bigger issue because they don't have the restrictions we do. So people are going to Idaho because there are fewer restrictions and then coming back into the
Okay.
state. So I asked about whether or not there would be county by county sort of intrastate restrictions, and they say not at this point. They are going to encourage people to stay home. But right now, they're working on what the restrictions would be for air travel.
That's it, just strictly for air travel.
Now-
A lot of
Okay.
our tourists, I mean, a lot of people coming to the state aren't air traveling,
They're driving.
they're driving. How do you control that?
So we don't have that yet. I know they're working on it, so that could be forthcoming. The other considerations talked about, I brought up the concern that we're seeing numbers of suicides and overdoses that are related to the timing of this is because of isolation and people being shut down. I think our recovery community is really suffering. So I asked that this be a consideration when making public health policy, that we look at the mental health and behavioral health, the consequences of this. And the governor's office said that there are unintended consequences and they're trying to balance that. But I didn't get a commitment to see that would change. There is an executive order perhaps coming out regarding mandatory workplace testing, and Oregon Health Authority would use that as a tool, but we don't have any specifics on that. Asked a little bit about some of the metrics. As we brought up on the call, the metrics have taken people by surprise, and people are getting a little skeptical because we're not seeing that the numbers are kind of matching up and moving the goalpost. So the governor's office did acknowledge that it's causing people to, after a while, not to put a lot of faith in those. And I also asked about the childcare shortage and what it would mean for parents who are facing schools being closed down, and whether or not there would be an accommodation for people to have to, it's going to be a financial hit for them. So if you can find childcare, but then you have to pay for it.
That's
And the
what
governor's
makes sense.
office said, well, you could drop your child off at a babysitter and hire a coach to help with online distance learning. I don't think that was the answer we were looking for. A lot of parents are saying, hey, we can't afford to do both. So anyhow, that was just the
We have
update.
one neighbor, and they both work. And I mean, they're not well-to-do, right? They're making good family wage. And they're going through the decision now because they have two small kids, which one quits their job.
Yeah.
To stay home with the kids.
So those were some of the things that came up, and we'll keep you posted on the travel restrictions and the mandatory testing in workplace.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I hadn't heard.
Because you and
about
me
that,
are
so-
such good friends.
And
That's right.
Yes.
Just to clarify, because I think there were some questions about the phase 1, phase 2.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Yeah.
I was just looking really quickly on the website, because I know they're not necessarily doing that, but with the latest restrictions that came down on restaurants and bars closing at 10 p.m.
Yeah.
That was the conditions that were in place under phase 1.
Okay, that's what I thought.
So that's what that order is kind of it's
Yeah,
not
it's
rolled
part
back
of
to
the-
phase 1, but that restriction was in
It was
place
in-
when we were in phase 1. for
Right,
restaurants
that
and
is, that, but there were
Where-
other things.
Where
that were
phase
in
2
place
didn't
for
have
phase
the
one.
10 p.m. closing time.
And
Right.
no counties get to move to the next phase at this
Yeah,
point,
If you're at one now, you're staying.
across the board.
Okay. Yeah, I hadn't heard that, but it makes sense with what we're seeing.
And
So,
of course, if you're Multnomah County, where you're not in phase 1, they've been generally accepted, they haven't been accepted yet. So that means they're not even accepted to go to phase 1, are they?
Well, we know Marion County is on the watch list now.
Yeah.
They were approved phase 1.
Yeah.
So
They
they're,
were in phase 1.
Multnomah County was, I believe.
They
I
were
don't
on
know that,
phase
yeah.
1, Ken?
Right,
They
but
were
I
on phase 1.
Commissioner Starrett added that, I believe that I thought you were correct too, that the, like being able to have booths back to back, with dividers is part of phase 2.
That's right.
And
For
now-
restaurants.
Go back to phase 1, then
Right.
you have to go, I mean, you can have the dividers, but you still have to use every other day.
But that hasn't happened yet. I
No,
just
that
want to
hasn't
clarify,
happened.
right?
But there is big concern in the restaurant industry that that's gonna happen.
Oh, okay.
And we won't know until,
till we know, yeah.
It sounds like consistently when I seek information on where transmission is happening, it doesn't sound like it's from restaurants. That's what I'm hearing at least. Is that what you're
Right.
hearing?
Right, and we're,
and they have no numbers to back it up. That's the issue, going from midnight to 10, roll back 2 hours. They don't have any numbers to tell us, well, because these 2 hours, here's how many cases there's been reported, or how many presumptive cases, because they don't track that. So it's like, well, gee whiz.
well, what they told us on the call at one point was that people who've been drinking for an extended period of time tend not to social distance.
Okay.
As you said, Commissioner, you can always start a little earlier.
Yeah,
if
start
that's
2
the,
hours early.
that's
Get
the
out there by
intent.
10.
That was my like head slap moment when I heard that.
Well, that's it. So now that means
Creative thinking.
they change
is what
it,
Commissioner
they
Olson
change it
has.
to 8 hours, because a lot of people are starting at 6 o'clock, so they change it to 8 o'clock. And then they change it to 4 o'clock, because a lot of people that aren't working, they can start drinking as soon as the bar opens. What is the, I don't know.
Commissioner Starrett, wait, do you still have more announcements? Thank you for that great information on your meeting yesterday.
I think that's it.
Okay.
On that.
Okay, great. And on the roundtable on Tuesday, because the governor's press conference was at 1:30, we did a quick version of roundtable and then just shared the screen so that we were able to provide comments to each other and kind of get some reactions and then follow up with it. So, and mostly what I figured out was that, I guess the takeaways, which you probably all have figured out, is the rate of increase has slowed of transmission in the state about three-ish weeks ago. And you can see that when you look at a lot of the curves. It's like, 2 weeks after May 15th, it goes up fairly steeply and then it tips back. Yeah, and that-
Hospitalization has gone down.
And Dr. Seidlinger made it pretty clear that that was his glimmer of hope, was seeing that. But for our county, we I forget, did Director Manfred also send you guys the link to the metrics? The OHA now has a page where they're following the.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. So at the moment, at least, the county is not in a state where we're meeting the school reopening numbers. But at other times we have been. So I take some encouragement from that.
But the state as a whole has to be at or below 5%.
Right, at the positivity rate.
So it wouldn't matter.
Yeah. I won't pull it up now. They had the current or last week's positivity rate, and it was at like 5.2 or something like that statewide. But Yamhill County is considerably below that as well. So I think there are some glimmers there.
Point 1.5 maybe.
Well, there's been a few counties that have had a 25% positivity rate. Yeah.
Wallowa, Union,
Yeah.
Sherman. The other thing is,
Oh,
is
yeah.
62% of Multnomah County cases are not being able to trace them back to an initial positive case. So
Oh, wow.
62% of those are not contact tracing back.
Do you know what our number? We're wandering far from announcements, but it's still good since we don't see each other that often. Do you know what the same
What
number
our
is
percentage
right
is,
now?
I
Okay.
don't.
I know
can
that
find
we
out.
were kind of bouncing back and forth around that like acceptable 30%, but
I can find out.
Yeah, because you're always going to have those that just say, I'm not going to talk to you because of, confidential. You get called by a tracer, you'll always have a certain percentage who'll say, no, I'm not going to give you any information. Well, you can't do anything about that if somebody decides not to give you information on the trace, or if they can't trace it back to a positive. What do you do? At 62%, that's pretty high.
that brings up an interesting question that I said that I might ask about IT about, and I haven't yet, which is that apparently, and that's what I was told that when a contact tracer calls from county public health on people's phones, it shows up as Yamhill County Sheriff, and so people generally let it go to voicemail and don't answer it, or they get somewhat disturbed by that. So I don't know if we can figure out whether that's actually happening. Like maybe somebody calls you and then you look on your phone.
Really? Is it, how would that happen? It
I
wouldn't,
can have Shane about
Okay.
that and see, I mean, it could be a setting with our ShoreTel system, with how.
That doesn't go
Right.
right department.
It seems like
How it comes out.
if it could be labeled something more
user friendly.
It's kinda like- But it's kind of like our outbound.
I mean, if the sheriff's office called me, I would answer it.
It's kind of
But
like our outbound calls. If Carolina or Carrie or somebody calls,
yeah,
it comes across the phone as Yamhill County.
okay,
But because it's our main number. But who called me? I'll call the old Carolina. Carrie says, "Did you try to call me?" No. I have no idea who tried to call me.
Carolina and Carrie and I often have that conversation where I call, like, I didn't call you,
Call Ghostbusters.
right?
Or COVID
So maybe we
Busters.
can do a little bit of sleuthing on that. I just apologize. I haven't reached out to Shane about it.
I can have Shane.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I'll get our percentage up a little bit more. So thank you for bringing that up so that it triggered my memory. Okay, Christian.
No, sir.
All right, thanks for all of your work this week. Ken?
No, I think the only thing that I would just, a quick update on is with Monday's work session that.
Yes, thank you.
In conversations I met with Abishaw late yesterday, working on one of the projects and getting that ready. So Carrie and Abishaw are working very diligently, trying to get everything that we talked about on Monday on the list by tomorrow's deadline. And I just want to recognize both Carrie and Abishaw have been doing a great job with that. And they really counts.
Yeah, thank you. It was written down that I was planning to thank them too, because Carrie helped with the Cove Orchard and with the West Side Road improvements. And her descriptions came out phenomenal. So yeah.
Yeah,
And then
they-
Jen Richter from the Early Learning Hub connected with Carrie. She had some ideas, but you probably also connected with her too.
Well, I connected with Sui,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I asked her for some input. And what has happened both with YCAP and Sui was that they actually submitted those applications. And I said, no, here, take a look at these are the questions that we'd like you to answer and resubmit to us.
Yeah.
And they both submitted them. So now we're calling Jody saying, scratch that, send it back, ignore it. Anyway, so Carrie's been
That's funny.
good there, and Abishaw and I are connecting later on to finish up the rest on our list.
Great.
Yeah, and was gonna meet with Dave yesterday, but it turns out Dave's not in town. He's over his cabin, so I have to meet over in the Steen, so I have to meet.
You have to
with
go
him
there.
remotely,
You have to go over
Which
there.
means he's gotta go down the hill to get cell
He has no
service.
cell service out there.
If you were out in the middle of no place, which is not, be nice.
I'm
right
surprised
now.
he didn't go out there to figure it out. Yeah.
Well, I was gonna, he says I can use his cabin anytime he wants, if you don't mind taking the 9 hours trying to find it.
And Jody Christensen did tell me that the 16 that we were planning to submit were the most of any jurisdiction. So
What the heck? Why
Yeah,
not?
well,
We
that's
might
it.
as well.
Even though we don't have all the details, getting on the list and just being able to submit the list is a good start.
and then I hope that we can follow up on the internet and the childcare ones. So
Yeah,
on our own if we need to.
Yeah.
And
Through the
bypass.
coronavirus. We may not be able to do the bypass one through the coronavirus. Okay, well, thank you for highlighting that because I meant to mention it too. A lot of work this week. All right, Carolina, do you have anything?
No.
Okay, thank you. And with that, I will close this meeting of the Kenneling County Board of Commissioners.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Chair.
Thank you.